Chapter 7. Over the Waves. It was just after December 1988, and winter had now settled in. The crossing over the Irish Sea was like a nightmare. There were waves like mini mountains tossing the small ferry about like driftwood. I threw up everything I had into the Irish Sea and more. The morning was nice to see as the ferry landed in Rosslare harbour, and it was good to place my feet on Irish soil. It was good to hear my heart neatly beating in my chest as I thought that I had left it somewhere half across there in the Irish Sea during the night. Rosslare was just as I imagined it to be. There was no sight of life anywhere except a little donkey tied to a tree outside the youth hostel. I pulled the few notes that remained in my pocket and I booked into the youth hostel for a few nights at Rosslare. As I looked out through the bedroom window, I watched the Sea-Link ferry turn around in Rosslare harbour and head out across the Irish Sea towards Wales. The youth hostel cut a nice shape on the highest point of the hill, looking out to the sea, and I was happy to be in Ireland. And for 3 days I lost myself around the sleepy port of Rosslare. I mapped out my map of Ireland and the places that I had wanted to take my music to on the streets, to the people. I walked and I worked my way from County Wexford, County Waterford, home of the world-famous crystal manufacturing industry. I never stayed long in Waterford as I was offered a free bus trip to Cork by a friendly backpacker from Canada called Dave. Dave was returning to his home in Canada and he gave me a book of bus passes that he no longer had any use of. So now I had my ticket to travel the length and breadth of the Emerald Isle. A stroke of good fortune and a busker's blessing, says I. So I left the Bolton House guest house in Waterford and I went walking along the quay with my 6-string Yamaha guitar towards the bus depot on the far side of town across the bridge. Beside the bus depot was also the train station of Waterford. As I made my way along the quay, I looked at the 2 cathedrals that stood defiantly against the early morning rain. One was Catholic and the other one was Protestant. Structures of granite, similar in appearance, yet unlike in many ways, religiously speaking. I sat in the bar at the depot and I had a drop of the hard stuff while I was waiting for the bus to come in. By the time the bus came in, I was half drunk. The bus left as the clock in the tower broke up a clatter of rebel pigeons from their sleep at the top of the tower. The bus driver was in no great hurry to get out of Waterford. For a second it looked as if he was stopping for a pint. Well, finally, I watched as the seagulls glid over the sky, and finally the road out of Waterford was an easy journey to Cork City. As we motored along, I delivered a portion of the blues to the passengers on the bus that was crawling out of Cork on the supposedly express. Surely, I thought, there must be life on some of those people in Cork somewhere. Maybe a handful of street pigeons and maybe even someone out there to appreciate what I was trying to do, because I had made my mind up. I'd made my heart and set it on Cork as an answer to the songwriter's prayer and dream, living and struggling and trying to survive. Now, it was a good morning, says I, to the warder as we got to Cork. "Good morning, is it?" came the reply of the warden. And I looked at him. "Are you having trouble with the rats?" says I with a grin. He looked at the few cars that were parked in the wrong place, writing tickets for them. "It's a good job you've got there, warden," says I. "Well, I've been doing it long enough." "So what are you doing these days apart from putting tickets on cars?" "Do you like music?" says I. And he smiled. "Well, actually, I'm renovating me house," he answered. And then he swung a blow with his left fist, almost grazing my cheek in the process. "I'll leave you to it," says I, and grabbed my Yamaha under my arm. "I'll be seeing you another day," says he. "I'll let you know when that'll be, and I'll make sure I won't be coming around." And I went on my way as the snow lay in my path, and on the street it had turned to slush, and the morning traffic was building up already on the Western Road. And I passed through Giro's Hotel, and I doubled back and decided to see maybe I could get a job in there. So I went in and I told them I could do some porter work, or I could even become a person who makes the beds, or a person who could do odd jobs, a janitor's job, or any kind of work that would be going. So I filled out a form that they give me as a formal application to be a jack of all trades, whatever was going job, and handed it then to the manager. Then from there I came out of the hotel and made my way down Oliver Plunkett Street and went into the Lacey House for a drink. And while I was there, I asked the manager if he wanted to hire a musician to play in his establishment. She looks at me and says, "Well, I'll think it over. Come and see me after Christmas and after the New Year, and maybe around Christmas, maybe around the summer holidays would do." If I had the chance, if I was still alive by then, I thought to myself. The daytime hours then flew by as if spare change in my pocket was disappearing, and love had left me like an orphan in the city. And the corners, every corner I came to, I could hear the tingle in my toes and feel the jingle in my head. I spent some time busking, and I wrote a song called Small Change. Zoom goes the spacecraft up in the blue. I promise you soon, babe, I'll fly home to you. I'll be taking pennies from my pocket and reddies from my shoe. That small change means I love you. Love is spending time, but small change for me. Small change I can't give no more. I'm on my way home. Blues, babe, that's small change. Straight out of my shoe. Jingles in my feet and tingles in my toes. I got no time. I guess that's the way it goes when you've got the blues. It's a thing called small change. And always the same. No alliterations. No alterations. Small change is my middle name. And then it was the night just after New Year. Not a house could I find for shelter. My pockets were empty of cash and my feet had blisters upon blisters, and I tried to push myself through the snow and the multitude of last-minute shoppers in Great Patrick Street. I'd fallen under their feet sometimes. I wondered if I did, would they even have the decency to pick me up? Or would I just get crushed in the stampede? If it were not for my trusty 6-string Yamaha acoustic, maybe, who knows, I'd still be sitting there in the valley of darkness. But I bravely fought off the foes and stood up all around like a hunter on heat, like a musician with a beat in his heart, and I waved in and out of doorways, stopping here and there for a song or two. Eventually I made a stand there in Winthrop Street at the doorway of the Swiss Gem jewellery store, and there I stayed for the most of the night, busking my heart out for the price of a feed or a bed. 2 busking hours later, I realised that I was facing the impossible task and decided to give in to the madness of the new year. It was hopeless going on any longer. People were rushing around blind in a bid to get something in for the new year into the house. Some items for the loved ones, for themselves, for the family. My throat was hoarse. My fingers were numb. My buskin box had a blank look on it, with a golden 20p coin in my hand, and I looked at it and stared back at me as if mocking me in contempt. But I bent down and picked it up and put it into my pocket, and I sighed and thought, okay, so at least I'm 20p better off. And I did bring my music to the people, so I've come off a little bit better. And I'll come back again tonight and tomorrow night if I have to. And I'll come back when all the streets are shut and the people aren't there if I have to. Maybe then, who knows, it'll be a better time. I'll have a better frame of mind, with a bit of that old Irish Christian spirit burning inside my heart. I walked around the town with the blisters on my feet, hoping somehow I would bump into some generous millionaire out on a walk, or perhaps a music lover that would pay to hear a song of mine. I walked for hours and hours, and my blisters felt like rivets in both feet, and each step I took was agony. But I kept on, and I kept singing over and over the melodies that I had in my head, and I kept thinking of new lyrics for my unfinished material. Thoughts poured through my head like Florence sieve into my memory banks, where they were stored up for later on. The soft twilight glow now surrounded me in an embrace as I passed by the Garda station at the far banks of the Lee. I shuffled my way through the streets very slowly and painfully as the strap of my 6-string cut through my shoulders. I just stopped near the bridge and watched the antics of young lovers partying and the others drinking. Yeah, the city centre was alive and buzzing with revellers, frolicking and alcoholic and on like never was going to end. I shuffled over the bridge and made my way back to busk the corners of Cork city centre. The only thought on my mind was, if I had enough only to get some bread, only to get a little bit, maybe a couple of bags of chips to satisfy the hunger. And you know what? It began with small change. I played small change and the money came. People gathered round and they listened, and it seemed that small change was a hit. I was on my way. I'd won their hearts over with small change, and my toes began to tap instead of jingle and tingle in my pockets. Well, they were now really tingling, jangling away. Small change and paper jingling, I could feel it, I could hear it. And jingle jangled around by the Lee. Small change and paper notes was very handy, lined in my Levi pockets. Guess what, says I? That's the way the blues goes. I went and bought a hamburger, and I bought some hot chips, and I ate them for the first time in the pavement. The first food I had in days. People passed by on the street wishing me all the best, and I exchanged with another greeting. Happy New Year! All the best to you too. Even though my feelings were low and somewhat shattered, I now had my bearings about Cork and the people and the place. It seemed like a nice place to be. Now all I needed to do was to get the head down somewhere without fear. I was fighting off to sleep as I stood there in the street, near the brig of my buskern soul, that between the ears of the original melodies in my thoughts, in my head, in my heart, that was running through like a locomotive on marble floors, there was no place to go. There I stood and sung and watched the people passing me by. A song began to drift into my soul, and I embraced it and memorized the first inspirations of the keyboard on my Yamaha guitar. And within about 20 or 30 minutes I shuffled away along McCurtain Street, and I heard the herald of the chimes ringing out something o'clock, and the hard times fell down around me, wringing out my strands of strength and squeezing out the grace that God had given me. And I shuffled along down by the Bam Bam bars of Cork, and I reached Washington Street. I was surprised to see a fellow shuffler about 30 yards ahead, and he was shuffling even slower than I was. And as I got closer to him, I thought to myself, well, things aren't that bad. I shuffled on until I was neck and neck with my companion shuffler. It was then I noticed that he was very drunk, feeling pains of hunger tear me gut from inside out. I continued along with 20 minutes. I was 20 yards ahead of my nearest shuffler. I gained confidence and strength that day. One of the biggest headaches that I ever had as a busker was with the drunk. For all drunks are the same. Fools in lost paradise and bottles of time to kill. Disaster one day I remember, because I was heading up the Western Road carrying my Yamaha under my arm, and things, well, three fools I suppose you'd call them, with a half a bottle of vodka called me over. "Give us a song, go on," they slobbered. "All right," says I, "I'll give you a song," not to be the person to turn any audience away. And I went over and I sat down behind them in the bus shelter. I was absolutely starving, but I opened up with a version of Donny Boy. They all sang along, out of key and harmony. Then they passed on a bottle of their vodka and a rolled up tobacco joint to me, and I had a puff. And it blew my lungs apart. "That's 20 times that one's been around," says the one with the red eyes. And he was joined in by the fourth man, who had 3 brown bags and a plastic carrier bag, sitting down there with us, and he handed a bottle of gin and a bottle of sherry and another bottle of vodka over to the band of cutthroats, who in turn handed me a bottle. I looked at the wings and the winos, and I had a fear about this, and an openness about it. So I took a swig of their brew, and the lights all went out. Let me tell you, I never felt a thing until I woke up 3 hours later. I had been unconscious for about 3.5 hours on a bus shelter there in the falling snow. And as I opened my eyes, the winos were gone, and so was my only means of survival, my 6-string Yamaha. The bastards. They had taken my guitar. Now I was without any support of any kind. I had no other means of staying alive. I was penniless, broken-hearted and black-eyed to boot. I made my way back to the town, and I stood in Winthrop Street outside the Blarney Silver and Gold Company. There I stood, singing unaccompanied for hours and hours. I had managed to pull a few people through, a few punters, just enough for a bed at the International Youth Hostel on the Western Road. Oh, sure, the snow was all over the place. In the little parlour houses, with their fires brightly aglow lighting up the parlours, pretty lights hanging from the trees still in the windows, kind of real cosy like. There was mistletoe and ceilings, and friendly feelings in most of the places I could see, and the homes that were attended by families. I had not had food for 27 days now, and was down to 6 stone at least, as I sat in the front parlour of the youth hostel. The manager approached me and asked me for my International Youth Hostel membership card. I produced it. Then he asked me where my luggage was. I answered it was stolen from me at the bus shelter down there by the roadside, by 4 winos. He asked me to leave. I said I have enough money to buy a bed, and it is your duty to see that I have one. He shook his head. He refused to check me in. I couldn't believe what was happening. Very calmly, I said, I've nowhere else to go. I'm entitled to a bed. He replied, I want you out here now. I refused and said, I'm a member of the International Youth Hostel Association and I'm not leaving until you check me in. He looked very nervous and angry when he said, I'm the boss of this place now, and I'm asking you to leave. Right. I'll decide who gets a bed round here, not you. It's my hostel. I was at the brink of a physical collapse and could not put up a fight if I had tried, but I remained firm and refused to leave. He said, if you're no out of the premises like in a couple of minutes, I'm calling the guards to come and turf you out. Well, that was it, I said. Listen to me, you go ahead and phone the Garda. He left the room with a sense of pride. 3 minutes later, these 2 big burly black dressed sheep in wolf's clothing entered the room and said, Right up, out now, out you go. I said, no guard, I'm not going. I'm entitled to a bed in this youth hostel and I'm not moving. You've been told no, you're troublemaker. No, said the biggest guard. Me guard? I said, and continued, I've been here now in Cork over a month. I've gone without food, I've gone without shelter, I've never once in all this time broken the law. I've not been in any trouble once. I haven't shoplifted even though I wanted to. Even though I went without, I haven't broken into any homes or shops. I haven't been drunk, I haven't been disorderly. I haven't even robbed any banks or anyone or anybody. Just one solitary soul, says I. Have I upset in court? I have not done. All I do is busk around your city. My city, this city, that's all, guard. The guard, lurking in the shadows, raised his voice in a very threatening tone and replied, The man of this hostel doesn't want you, and we've been told and asked to remove you. I looked him in the eyes. I'm not moving, I said, and sat down on the sofa. There was a heated discussion in the room. A fellow Australian backpacker entered the room at this point. He had been listening to the entire drama from the kitchen. He never knew me from Adam, but spoke up for me. He's right, you know. You can't throw him out. He's a member of Youth Hostel Association. And I know he's every right to your bed. Now, I'm willing to pay whatever the fee is. And I said, I've got the money. I've got the £3.50 for a bunk. All I really want is to have a good sleep. I mean, it's not much to ask. Just cast your mind. It can't be that hard to do, to be kind for once. So the guards looked at me and they said, well, now, we'd like to think that there is a little bit of, goodwill, but like, we've got to do our job. And at this point, I'm threatening to arrest you if you don't leave the hostel, and you'll be put up in a cell for a couple of weeks until the court case comes, if that's what you'd like. I continued. Well, it's me. I've got every right to be here. You're in the wrong. At this point, the Australian again, he spoke up saying, as a member of the International Youth Hostel, this man must be provided with a bed. But his attempt to rescue me was hopeless. I stood up and said, I've been all over the world and stayed in youth hostels from Sydney to London, and in my entire experience as a traveller and an ambassador for my country, not once have I had trouble getting put up in a youth hostel. And furthermore, I never experienced anything like this in my life. Now, I don't know what this problem is, guard, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm an ambassador for the international movement of backpackers here, and I'm doing not a bad job. I was running out of breath, and I said, let me inform you, I'm a writer, and you may as well know that. There will be a mention of this incident in one of my books. And they giggled and grinned and said comfortably, yeah, well, you can write about us, huh? I saw the opportunity and I said, I have the right to ask you both for your names and your number. The biggest guard was taken back at my demand and immediately replied, McCarthy, while the other one said, having the nerve to call himself an upholder of the law, my number, mister, is very confidential. So very coolly I walked over and looked around his uniform and speaking aloud, well, it's 151. Is it then? And I jotted it down on a piece of paper. The guard panicked and said, Oh, Sullivan. I said, thank you, guard. I hope you both realise I'm a visitor and a stranger to Cork, and I have no place to go but the gutter, and you'd probably arrest me even if I was out there doing that for loitering, I'm sure. Isn't that so, guard? They pushed me out the door and said, enjoy your stay in our country. I stood and watched them get into their Ford Sierra, and off they went up the Western Road. I stood there alone, a long way from home, without a friend to call my own. I had no way of getting any shelter that night, and it was 3 to 4 hours to go before the morning light would come. I made my way slowly, walking round the tub, walking round the town, just keeping movement and the body going to stay warm. And I took a seat somewhere near a water fountain in the centre of the town, and I thought about the year ahead and hoped to God that things would be a little bit easier. I sipped in the silence and I spoke to a young group who were coming through past the corner, and I was surprised to hear a couple of them singing. And I started joining in, and we went busking around the city for a half an hour. I took the guitar that they were carrying. I told them about the story of me losing my guitar. They told me to go and speak to the fella that run the newspaper in the town, and maybe he could put something in the local paper about what happened. I thought that was a good idea. I took the guitar and I did my own version of Jingle Bells. I did a few more of my songs. We said goodbye and they wished me well. A couple of the lads stopped and they put some coins in my hand. A couple of them looked at me. You're in the IRA, aren't you? No. I'm a musician songwriter from Australia. No, you're not. You're an escaped prisoner from Dublin or something like that, huh? Is that who you think I am? Another lad said, You're up to no good, aren't you? No, I'm a travelling singer, songwriter. I take my songs around the world. I've gone from Australia to England and now I'm home in Ireland. Give us a couple of your songs, come on. So I started doing a couple of songs, and one that they knew, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And as I did that, they were joining in singing and at the same time filling my pockets with small change. And then, as we said goodbye and all the best for the new year, I was nearly in tears. I counted the odds in my pocket, which was almost £25. And I walked up to Wellington Place and I saw the shops just opening, and I bought myself a breakfast. And after several attempts, I was able to stand up and walk out with a smile on my face. I met some other people that day in the city, and I found my way into the newspaper shop, and I spoke to the editor and I told him the story of having my guitar stolen, and he mentioned that he did see 4 winos sitting down out the doorway of a shop, couldn't play the guitar, they were just beating it with their hands. And I went out to look for them. I went out to find my guitar. And at the end of the day, I had found the boyos, and I had managed to get my guitar back. End of chapter 7.